Welcome everyone to the session Let's Act. We want to be integrating decent work in the collection and recycling of end-of-use plastics. This session will highlight the challenges but also solutions when it comes to setting up effective and sustainable plastics collection for more recycling and how such systems can help improve the livelihood of the workers, the informal waste workers like Maria Ofelia in Central America.
Pues lo que ganamos no es mucho, pues. A veces solo 100.
So to Maria, plastics is not waste, but a precious resource. We should all see plastics as such, and that is why in this session we will often refer to end-of-use plastics to highlight this material is not waste, but in fact a resource for our economy. So let me introduce our speakers. We are honored here today by the presence of Mr. Alex Saer, Special Advisor for Circular Economy, Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development in Colombia. Professor Tim Benton, Research Director of the Independent Policy Institute and world-leading think tank Chatham House. Welcome, Mr. Benton. And Ms. Janice Jones, CEO of Ocean Conservancy based in Washington, D.C. She works to create science-based solutions for healthy oceans, trash-free seas, yay. And replacing Mr. Gonzalo Muñoz, the founder of Triciclos, who cannot join us today because of personal reasons, welcome Mr. Agustín Correa Larraín, new business manager Triciclos based in Brazil, Chile, and also since recently Colombia. Triciclos says that waste is a design error that needs to be fixed, a very original approach. Before diving into the discussion, let's go back to Guatemala to learn more about the 28-year-old Maria and her 3 children.
En 20 años ha crecido. Nosotros lo vimos cuando vino la primera camionada. 2, 3, 4, ahí parece que creo hasta 15 camiones. Pues la verdad para mí, al verlo eso, porque si no hubiera eso, ¿dónde nos ayudaríamos nosotros? ¿Sí? Mi nombre es María Ofelia, tengo 28 años, tengo 3 hijos. Pues lo que ganamos no es mucho, pues. A veces solo 100. Una ropa para nosotros nos sirve, de lo llevamos. Sí. Sí, para mí siempre es costoso, pues, porque si no lo hago, pues ¿quién me va a dar comida a mis hijos?
Dire circumstances. The problem looks quite clear in Guatemala. We move south on the American continent. I turn to the special advisor to the Colombian Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development, Alex Saer. Can you tell us how Colombia has advanced on plastic waste management? Oh, we don't have a connection with Alex at the moment, unfortunately. So I would like to invite the audience to put your question and comment in the comment comment box. I was thinking the comment box is a little bit like an audience chat. The audience chat is like running into each other at the bar and exchanging views. And then the Ask the Speaker button is the button you can use to put your specific question to the speakers that we have on our panel. So please use that function. That'd be lovely. So we've just seen Maria and heard her story. Those are dire circumstances, and we're very curious to learn from you, Alex Ayer. Can you tell us how Colombia has advanced on plastic waste management?
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's my pleasure to be here today with such a great company. Let me first offer excuses and give a special greeting on behalf of Minister Correa. He was delighted to participate in this panel, however, last-minute personal issues don't allow him to be with us today. I also want to salute my fellow panelists. Colombia has committed to reduce greenhouse gases emissions by 51% in 2030, which imply great efforts to improve energy, water, and material productivity. Adopting and implementing circular economy actions will be key to reach that goal. In fact, we are proud to be the first country in Latin America that has established a national strategy on circular economy. This strategy was developed hand in hand with different local stakeholders and has prioritized different types of materials, including plastics. We established the National Roundtable for Sustainable Management of Plastics in 2018, recognizing that problems around plastics needs holistic solutions. As a result, we are now ready to implement our national plan for sustainable management of plastics based on actions of prevention, reduction, new business opportunity, and technological developments, among others. One of the most important stepping stones in these issues is the prohibition of single-use plastics entry into the national parks of Colombia, seeking a positive impact on about 17 million hectares, which is approximately 8.4% of Colombian territory. We also laid out a color code that aims to separate residues from their source. This will help to unify and simplify residues curbside separation. Another measure, a key on all this issue, is the result reached with our tax on plastic bags. As saw between 2016 and 2019, we reduced more than 50% of distributed bags in department stores, going from 1.2 thousand million bags distributed per year to 600 million, which is a really good improvement. So this
Absolutely,
is only
very
part of all
impressive.
the actions we are doing. And we will be more than glad to give more information in the future.
Thank you so much also for stepping in, Mr. Saer. Thank you for elaborating on this. That's the plastic waste issue. So you're obviously taking it very serious in Colombia. What's the current situation there with the recyclers? You call them base recyclers, I believe. When you implement new policies, how do you keep them in mind?
So we think they are key to implementing the circular economy strategy in Colombia. They recover recyclable materials, they reintroduce them into the recycling value chain, and they provide the industry with recovered raw materials. In Colombia, we have around 43,000 former recyclers, which are part of almost 600 organizations. So one of the most important things is to formalize them and to enhance their capacity. So we are developing policies in order to become them entrepreneurs of cleaning services. For example, Colombia recognized them a share of the cleaning fee, which is paid by citizens as part of the waste collection system. And so by this fee, they are receiving an income in addition of the selling of these recovered materials. Also, we have launched our extended broad responsibility program for containers and packaging materials. Our goal in 2021 is to recover almost 65,000 tons of plastics. And recycles are important in the implementation of this policy.
Yeah.
The companies has been starting matching up with recyclers in order to achieve this goal. So we are supporting these recyclers associations to improve their technical capacities and to improve their capacity to identify and classify the different type of plastics to enhance their capacity on recycling.
So a very important role they have to play. Many thanks, Mr. Saer. We will hear more from you during this discussion. We're already getting in some questions for you and for the other speakers because you're using the Ask the Speaker button. That is good news. Keep doing that, and we might get to all of those questions. Let me turn to Professor Benton. Chatham House is a knowledge partner for PACE, the platform to accelerate the circular economy, simply PACE. You do a lot of research into these topics. When talking about a transition to a circular economy, we think about people like Maria. I think we should keep them in the not the backs of our minds, but the front of our mind. Will this transition bring opportunities or risks, you think, for these informal workers?
Lovely to be here. Thank you very much. Well, I think it's very clear that we need to transform our economies to live within planetary boundaries. And just with any other form of industrial transformation, we need to also consider that that transformation is a just transformation, which is to minimize the potential for people to lose out in that transformation. And that's as important for the circular economy as it is for decarbonisation or even moving to a digital automated world, for example. For the waste sector, it includes consideration of the risks and opportunities for employees and workers all along the plastic value chain, and very much includes, as Maria has shown us, the importance of including the informal waste pickers. It is important to realise that and to make sure that the circular economy solutions do not impact negatively on people's informal livelihoods within the sector. Waste pickers should absolutely not be seen as a problem to navigate, but as an opportunity. They have deep understanding and expertise about plastic waste and have a key role to play in circularizing what today is a throwaway packaging and a throwaway culture. Mm-hmm. We need to consider how to create inclusive models that improve livelihoods, incomes and working conditions. And for example, we at Chatham House are currently working on a project about how upstream intervention, whether through plastic converters or retailers, will impact downstream through waste management processes and further impact on informal workers. It's very possible to design, as the previous person was saying, design incentives to make sure that informal waste pickers do not lose out in this transition towards sustainability.
That sounds like something you would very strongly agree on, Mr. Saer. How do you feel like, if you look at the practical implementation, right, when making these changes, what does that look like? Is the work of Colombian recyclers already improving? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think it's really improving. Like the program that the government has started to formalize this community, the community of recyclers has given really good results. For example, in 2019, the recyclers organizations of Bogota, only Bogota, which number close to 16,000 members, received close to $28 million via the use fee. So this has helped them improve their livelihoods and minimize the impact of possible material flows, price fluctuations. Mm-hmm. So they can improve, they can receive incomes from the materials that is sold, but also from the fee that is paid by the government. Also, the waste pickers in Colombia has obtained in Colombia special protection from the courts, judicial courts. So this has influenced in the generation of policies to improve their working conditions, such as the provision of vehicles, training processes, training administrative and managerial skills, among others. Our goal in the government is to turn recyclers into cleaning services entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much. That actually answers a question that came in from the audience. They were asking to elaborate on the waste fee. So thank you very much for that. Go back to Professor Benton. What do you think of the way forward proposed by Mr. Saer and Colombia to include those informal waste workers? And what else is needed? Because I'm sure that that's not all of it.
It's very impressive to hear what has just been said. I'd further want to highlight some of the results of a paper that we did last year, I think it was, or might even been earlier this year, on the circular economy transition in the Latin America and Caribbean region. There we show that the circular economy is closely connected to trends in digitalization and what we loosely call Industry 4. This also applies to the waste management sector, automation and collecting and sorting of household waste and plastics and so on. Digital technologies and automation can be very much used for the benefit of informal workers, but this requires comprehensive vocational training programs on digital skills. Further research to be published in a forthcoming paper on using digital innovations to reduce plastic pollution, where the focus was on half a dozen African countries, shows that digital solutions can connect households, can connect collectors, including waste pickers, and processors. There are many examples of African startup companies that are beginning to use digital platforms for data exchange, digital payments and vouchers to finance better collection and recycling, as mentioned, and connect different stakeholders across the plastic value chains. So it's not just about paying people, it's also about training people and doing a whole host of different things, but upskilling to drive forward the circularity.
Yeah, I'm going to look at some questions coming in from the audience. For Professor Benton, the formalization of the informal workers is an end goal which we should not lose sight of. However, it may not happen overnight. I don't think it will. What is the interim solution to ensure the informal workers are protected and access decent work opportunities?
Well, that's a very good question. And if we knew the answer to that in every situation around the world would be a much better place. I think, in different jurisdictions, the immediacy of the solutions will be quite different. In some places, it will be more taxation driving reduction in plastics, but providing an income source that will be allowed to be redirected at the informal waste pickers. In other places, it will be more training and vocational regimes to upskill workers to move into new sectors and so on. But there isn't a simple, straightforward answer. If there was, we wouldn't be in this dire situation where all of our economies are completely unsustainable and inequitable at the moment.
Yeah, so the next question about world peace, I think we can skip to then. What do you believe is the main risk, this is a question to Mr. Saer, of moving towards a circular economy, if any? So what is a risk moving towards a circular economy?
Yeah, there are risks because new opportunities arise. And when new opportunities arise, there are actual processes and actual companies that will lose a share of the market. But there are other opportunities for other companies, innovative companies, that will get those share of the market. So it's when you develop a new paradigm, there are risks and opportunities. The thing is to show the risk to our companies and show the opportunities and training them in order to get advance of that opportunities that they will have.
Let me see, for Professor Benton, are products made from recycled plastics themselves useful for continued reuse and recycling?
Well, in some circumstances, obviously, yes. In others, not so much. But if I can also touch on the previous question, there is a significant risk in not transitioning to the circular economy, as well as risks in the transition themselves. And obviously, if we don't get this right, we drive further inequality through driving more climate change and more environmental degradation, which of course tends to impact on the most marginalized populations anyway. So there is a risk involved in transitioning, but there's probably a bigger risk in the long term in not transitioning.
Right, very clear. A somewhat practical question. Let me see for Mr. Saer, could you tell a bit more about part of the waste? Oh, no, I already had that. How does one calculate the amount that is paid for plastics? What factors influence the amount paid?
In the actual fee that is paid by the government, so there is a fixed percentage of the fee that is paid by every citizen in order to acknowledge that amount to the recyclers. But it's not only for plastics, it's also for paper, for cardboard, for any other material which is recycled. They, in their formalization process, they have to contabilize, acknowledge what the amount of material which is recovered by them, and then the government pays them that amount based on the amount that is recovered. So there is an incentive not only for the formalization process, because there are many others recyclers that are not formalized, but this is a very big incentive to formalize them, but also an incentive to increase the amount of materials which are recycling by them.
Thank you very much for both your answers. It's been very interesting to listen to both of you, Professor Benton and Mr. Saer. We will hear more from you. Addressing their knowledge as expertise, I thought, was a very empowering point. And that's interesting as we move towards Africa for a very powerful initiative from Bilikis Adebiyi Abiola.
WeCyclers is a company, it's a recycling company that helps people capture value from their waste. And the way we do it is that we basically are trying to help to encourage people to see that, to learn about proper waste management practices. We had seen that, people that live in waste, that live with, in dirty areas, they have issues with their health. It affects them financially. So we see that actually providing people with a way of disposing of their waste properly will actually help to improve their lives. We have a very innovative model. We have a fleet of low-cost tricycles, which we call WeCycles, that go from house to house to collect their waste. At the point of collection, the household gives us their plastic bottles or pure water sachets and aluminum cans, and we weigh the material and record it. The waste is then brought to our hubs, where it's further sorted and aggregated before being sold to recyclers.
The reason why the work that WeCyclers does is so important is that it provides a low-cost collection infrastructure in many countries that are that don't have working waste collection infrastructures. Countries like Nigeria Nigeria has a population of about 70% that live in poverty, and there are so many competing priorities. And one of the things that WeCyclers realized when we started the project, and one of the things that made us really start the company, was when we went into these communities, we saw that uncollected waste actually contributed to poverty. It ends up in drainage channels. It leads to flooding. It leads to pollution. It contributes to malaria. So that's one aspect. There's also the aspect of helping to empower people with their waste. There's a lot of unemployment, underemployment, and people need ways and sources of livelihood. And this waste actually has a value. And so what WeCyclers is doing is it's connecting the dots for people in these communities. It's helping them to improve their communities. It's helping them to keep themselves safe. It's helping them to be more productive, but it's also helping them to earn extra money while also protecting the environment. Because this waste, if left in communities, is going to, it's disastrous. We know that if the plastic bottles that are being collected are collected via models like WeCyclers, We know that the people that are collecting it, the people that are a part of the process are being empowered. We know that the communities that need it the most are being, are a part of the discussion. So I think having the kinds of models that WCEF+ has is very important. And it's also a very replicable model. It's a model that can be taken to any country all over the world, and it can easily be introduced to ensure that the circular economy is replicated all over the world.
I'm a single mother. So as soon as I start this job, I think it's helping me with my child. And today, I thank God, it's better than before.
As we can see, the transition to a circular economy can provide an opportunity in both Africa and Latin America, as pointed out by Professor Benton, and demonstrated in a very inspiring way in the story we just saw in Nigeria. We have also heard Mr. Sayer speak to how the Colombian government uses the waste crisis as an opportunity to introduce new circular regulations, all the while providing decent work for the informal workforce. Now, let's turn to Ms. Jones, CEO of Ocean Conservancy, and Agustin Correa of Triciclos. Both are leaders in the PACE leadership group. It's good to have you here. Agustin, let me start with you. You're the new business manager of Triciclos, which is doing great work on separate waste collection in several countries in Latin America. What is your recipe for that?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I jumped on board at the very end, but I'm so grateful for being here and share the stage with all of you. And thank you, Sophie, for the kind words. And I would say that the recipe lies in at least 3 pillars to keep it short. The first one is collaboration and not leaving no one behind. And especially also engage with the incumbents, right? Having them on board is really important to drive change. The how, having a mindset of a beginner's mindset with a never done product or service is really important, because in that way, every single day, you can change practices related to consumerism and waste management with the goal of balancing the 3 cycles. That's why it's the name of Triciclos. It's the translation of 3 cycles, balancing the social, environmental, and financial cycles. And lastly, what we do with our solutions, with our recycling station, is to empower existing communities around waste management. So to develop more sustainable ways of working, to create new habits around circular economy, and getting that data to foster new designs, new innovations, and at the end of the day, helping them to redesign their own business model. So yeah, it's a powerful combination of forces, I would say.
Thank you, Agustin. And already doing it in 3 countries, that's quite impressive. Let me turn to Ms. Jones. Janice, we hear repeatedly that this extended producer responsibility, this EPR, is the solution for plastic collection. However, legislation takes too long. That takes years. So what can Ocean Conservancy help to do to speed things up a little?
Thank you. I just want to say we're so appreciative of this important conversation, and I really support the remarks that everyone has made so far. I think we all share a desire to build an inclusive circular economy that keeps plastics out of the environment. And that's why at Ocean Conservancy, we take a broad view. We look at protecting our ocean and the communities that depend on them. And to do that, we need to reduce the amount of plastics we use, especially single-use plastics. We need to better manage the plastic that's already in the system. And we need to clean up the plastic that's already in the environment. And better managing that plastic that's already in the system is a necessary prerequisite for a truly circular economy. And right now we have a lot of great commitments by the private sector and world governments, but they're not nearly enough. Taken together, they only stem the flow of plastics into the environment by about 7%. And we know that by 2050, the total cumulative greenhouse gas emissions from plastic production and incineration could be equivalent to about 13% of the remaining global carbon budget. So we have a plastics problem, we have a climate problem, And the reality is that they're both a carbon problem. So if we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and decouple consumption from fossil fuels, we have to dramatically increase recycling rates globally. And this requires a really considerable capital investment and a steady stream of operating funding. So we've identified extender producer responsibility, or EPR, as a key mechanism to meet that funding gap in our 2019 plastic policy playbook. And we have an urban ocean program that seeks to build the capacity of city leaders by establishing a platform to showcase best practices and provide city leaders with the diagnostic data and other tools they need and connect them to experts and potential partners. And we have a forthcoming survey of financial instruments that will identify capital market tools that can be brought to bear in the fight against ocean plastic pollution. So there's a lot to be done, but there is also a lot that we can do starting right now.
Yeah, the aspect of finance is something that will definitely come up also in the course of these days at this conference. It's a very important aspect. Augustine, let me go back to you. In your view, what are the most cost-effective ways to collect plastics in these low and middle-income countries? What are the roles of the informal workers in such collection systems?
That's actually a really fascinating question, because I think that the success that we have had so far in our model lies on collaboration, and is driving these existing communities that I mentioned before, and to ask them to give a little bit, a little effort to segregate the materials or do something in the point of drop off. But that action needs to be really connected to the different value chains of materials, right? Because in some parts, the middleman, they manage the segregation systems of the different plastics, but at least
It's very unfortunate, but your audio is segregating from your video somewhat. Then let me for now turn to Ms. Jones. The Ocean Conservancy has been looking into the informal sector and their role in an efficient plastics collection to prevent leakage to water bodies and then eventually into the ocean, the famous or infamous plastic soup, obviously. What are the short-term actions that have come out of this report?
Thank you. 15 million people are estimated to work in the informal waste management sector globally. And while we are an environmental organization, we're also committed to justice and equity for the informal sector waste collectors as we work toward marine debris solutions. So we've been working to draw attention to the issue for some time. A couple of years ago in 2019, we published a report on the role of gender in waste management. And as you mentioned, last year, we put out a report on the role of the informal sector. And what we found is that in many parts of the world, informal sector waste collectors provide a vital service. In some places, they provide the only trash collection in many communities, and they should be recognized for their critical contributions to waste management and recycling. But it's not uncommon for the informal sector to have no formal identification, to lack access to health services, to education. Income levels are often unstable, their working conditions can be unsafe, and that reality has only been worsened during the global pandemic. So our newest project is called Advancing Solutions to Plastic Pollution Through Inclusive Recycling, or ASPIRE. And this is an innovative partnership. We're focused on collaboration that seeks to empower informal sector waste collectors in Colombia and Vietnam to become part of the solution to marine debris by improving their safety, by improving their capacity, their ability to collect and process plastic, particularly those low-value plastics. And our partners in this project include iWork, the Inclusive Waste Recycling Consortium, which is an organization with many years of experience in improving informal sector waste collector working conditions and safety. They're providing technical support and assistance, and they help develop new end markets for those low-value plastics to stabilize the informal waste collector incomes. And in Colombia, we're really delighted to be partnering with an organization called SEMPRE, which has a long history of working on sustainable and inclusive circular economy projects. And this sort of brings it back to the first question. Ultimately, we hope to demonstrate that inclusive recycling is a viable pathway in places where the informal sector is pervasive, and that the focus should be on providing dignified work for these frontline heroes. And we very much hope to use the rigorous metrics and the data we'll collect during this project to help develop new and inclusive EPR models that are appropriate for places that have large informal sectors.
Thank you very much. Agustin, I think we have our audio back. Let's give it one more try. We're talking about the collaboration when it comes to the role of informal workers in such collection systems.
Yes, so as I mentioned, the model between collaboration between the citizens and the waste pickers is key. Recognizing the vulnerability that they have and then has to go into the EPR laws, as Colombia has mentioned here, is fundamental, because in other way we put all the burden on the informal sector in terms of getting their income based on the value of the materials, but we often see how little value they had in when there is no proper ways to collect it. So engage companies, especially the big ones, in these EPR laws, in the design of better systems for the citizens, for the different communities is key. And engage the waste in a public-private solution, and to pay for the service that the informal collection services give us.
Right, they actually provide value, so they need to receive their end of the bargain. Absolutely. Thank you so much for stressing that, all of you. Really well done. And now it's time for some audience participation. Because we have a poll. How should end-of-use plastics collection in Latin America and the Caribbean be financed and managed? How should that work? So there's a multiple choice option for you. A, financed by the government, managed by the government. Financed by the government, managed by the private sector. Or financed by the private sector, managed by the private sector. Or D, financed by the private sector, managed by the government. Or E, none of the above, if you want to be really original, but then it would be really nice if you could elaborate on your view in the chat box, because we're very curious to hear from you. So let's take a look at our panel as we await your answers. Very curious to hear from that. But Mr. Saer, what do you think? A, B, C, D, E?
I think a combination of those.
Oh.
I cannot say one of them, because, for example, EPR schemes in Colombia are financed by the private sector and managed by the private sector. But also there are other incentives to increase the plastic reuse and plastic recycling in our country. So I think the private sector is powerful. It has really good operation systems, and they can develop all these circular economy strategies and mechanisms, and include them into their material flows. So I think it could be by the private sector, but with the support of the government and also NGOs.
Mm-hmm. Professor Benton, I saw you chuckle a little. What do you think? What would be the ultimate solution for this one?
Well, I liked the combination of everything answer. In reality, it's got to be managed by the private sector, but it's got to be well regulated by government to avoid it being exploitative, or to avoid it not doing the job that we need it to do, which is effectively to move towards circularity. but it further needs to be licensed by citizens in general. Everybody's got to be on board to say this is what we need to do. So it's a kind of three-way interaction, but managed definitely by the private sector.
Well, that's interesting because we've just received the answer by the audience, and it is a resounding financed by the government, managed by the government. So all the balls on the government. Why do people tend to look at the government so much? A lot of work for you, Mr. Sayer.
Yeah, a lot of work. You can see, for example, we developed a pilot project in the EPR scheme in 2020, and we allow companies to pilot their EPR schemes. On 2020, we make changes into the EPR schemes based on the experience of the private sector, and we improve our policy based on that experience. So I truly believe the private sector has to be on board, has to be the main actor, but with the whole support of the government, with many other policies that support not only the EPR, but the generation of a culture among the citizens.
We lost Mr. Saer all of a sudden and had a visual of someone else, but clearly not the person who wanted to answer the question. We have some questions coming in for our panel, so let's see if we can take a couple. Maybe did... The most answered, so financed by the private sector, managed by the government, apparently is the winner now. Some answers coming in a little later actually came up with that, or people actually got some insights based on your answers. That could also be the case. A general question for all of you: why are we not moving at the speed we need toward a state of the art collection and recycling of end-of-use plastics? What is stopping us? That is a gigantic question. Maybe there's an answer from Triciclos here. Agustin?
Yes, that's a good one, and I think it can be extended to a lot of things happening worldwide. But definitely is the rising of the awareness of the problem. I think from 2015 onwards, from the very first publications of Ellen MacArthur Foundation and other schools of thought around circular economy, I think that the problem has been massively put in the top of minds, right? What is happening with the packaging solutions? What is happening with everything that we are generating in our homes? So from that awareness, we have seen a rapid increase in initiatives around collecting and recycling. But it's also nice to see that recycling is not enough. And it's often said that we won't recycle out of this problem. So it's nice to see the rise of initiatives around reuse, reduction, elimination, lots of upstream innovation. So I think it's a ship that is moving forward really quick. And I hope that the exponential growth, it will be catalyzed really, really soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. We've heard a lot from our speakers. So how can we move into action? Because we do need it. On behalf of PACE, that recently launched the Circular Economy Action Agenda on Plastics with 10 calls to action, I have Ms. Christa Kroeft with me. Ms. Christa Kroeft is the global leadership lead in the PACE, the platform for accelerating the circular economy, as we know by now, and oversees the leadership commitments to transition to a circular economy. Prior to PACE, she worked for various international organizations in Africa and Asia, developing new programs and managing knowledge. So Christa, how can can you take these calls to action forward?
Well, as you just mentioned, PACE has launched our action agenda containing 5 different value chains, including plastics. So for plastics, we also identified 10 calls to action. Out of these 10, we identified 2 specific calls to action, mainly the collection issue and the integration of decent work in the circular value chain of plastics. And we conducted some consultations with our partners to basically understand what is already happening on the ground, and secondly, what else can we do to move the needle? Because it's not all about an action report, it's about actually implementing the action.
And what did you find?
What we found was actually quite straightforward, and it reinforces the statements that have been made by our speakers here so far, but it's really the main challenge is the value of the end-of-use plastics is too low for informal workers to actually make a decent living off of it. So there's no profit margin. There's transportation costs, there's all sorts of additional costs. So the fact is that this is never going to be a good business model until we are clear on how are we going to finance a larger system that includes decent work for informal workers, including decent wages. So again, we're back at the extended producer responsibility system, and our speakers have already alluded to it. It's a vast system, it's very complex, it's very complicated as well.
And we need to move into action, right?
We absolutely need to move into action, and because it's so complex, it takes some time, so we need to have interim solutions right now.
Right. So who will you work with? And how will you get into action?
How we start to do this is to work towards extended producer responsibility. So what we want to do, and we have already started the design of this project, is to identify existing short-term solutions that have proven their effectiveness on the ground, that are integrating decent work as well, and that are building towards EPR. So it's really addressing the problem today, but building towards a larger system for the future. So there's basically 3 phases that we're envisaging. So the first one is to identify the existing initiatives on the ground and to assess them. To what extent do they contribute to the extended producer responsibility system as a building block? And secondly, to assess them in terms of their impact on climate mitigation and on decent work and access of informal workers to their rights. And then based on that impact assessment, we're able to identify the most successful case study, the most successful solutions to then implement. And we want to do this with a group of public and private actors, companies, government, civil society, and ensure that the voices of the informal workers are included in the design of that solution.
But really in this broad coalition. Of course, we would love to hear from the audience how they feel about the idea proposed by you, Krista, by PACE, really. Please share your views in the comment box. It'd be really interesting as we gather your responses. Let me return to the speakers because I'd be very curious to know what your response is to what PACE is suggesting here, and also your commitment to moving in the proposed way forward with PACE. In other words, how are you going to keep the drumbeat going? Let me start with you, Alex Ayer.
Thank you very much. I think that this project PACE has is really important. We already have an EPR scheme, but we know and we acknowledge that there are room for improvement in the implementation of this EPR scheme. So we can collaborate with PACE and with other partners in order to evaluate how the EPR scheme is developed here in Colombia. What are the strengths? What are the barriers? And how, which is really important for us, how the recyclers are incorporated into the whole recycling process in this EPR scheme. So I think this is a really good initiative, and we are eager to collaborate and participate in this program and share our knowledge about the implementation and also to know about other experiences.
Now, Ms. Jones, how will the Ocean Conservancy work on the proposed way forward with PACE?
Well, first, I would really like to thank both PACE and the other speakers on this panel for their leadership on this issue, and importantly, for shining a light on people who are so often in the shadows. I think that PACE has really captured the complexity of the problem and the need for action by a very wide set of stakeholders. For our commitment from an ocean perspective, because the ocean affects all of us, we need solutions that advance both people and the planet. So Ocean Conservancy pledges to work with PACE to highlight the importance of dignified work for frontline waste workers through that Aspire project I talked about a little bit earlier. Like all pollution, plastic pollution impacts vulnerable communities the hardest. And so we need to work toward environmental justice for those communities most impacted by plastic pollution as we work toward a circular economy. And in particular, we look forward to collaborating with the Colombian government as it seeks to make their vision for a healthy and thriving communities and oceans a reality. Dignified work means dignified wages. And to achieve that, the private sector has to take full responsibility for the post-consumer life of the products that they put on the market. Ocean Conservancy has long highlighted the need for extended producer responsibility, and we pledge to work with PACE, with governments, and with others to advocate for EPR's adoption. And this needs to be done alongside efforts to curb our reliance on single-use plastics, particularly those items that are not recycled and that frequently end up polluting our beaches, our waterways, and the ocean. And we also commit to collaborating with PACE and others to continue to share the latest science and to bring the collective lessons that we learn to our networks, including our urban ocean municipal partners in 10 countries now.
A very broad commitment. Yeah. Commitment on all areas.
For this problem.
Thank you
We've
very
talked
much.
about the financial gap, and that is something we're committed to.
Thank you also for stressing this, the necessity of a just transition. Professor Benton, what is your commitment and the Chatham House commitment to moving forward with PACE?
Well, we very much support this project, and like the way it's been articulated, Chatham House, which is a leading international think tank, has a mission to help countries and societies and governments move towards a more sustainable world. So this very much fits in within our mission statement. We really like the geographical assessment focus, and we can bring very much as a knowledge partner, contribution to evidence building of effective solutions. We can bring in our network of academics on a global basis and practitioners and use Chatham House's convenings to amplify findings and results. And we can build synergies between this project and other projects we're supported in. For example, we've got a big project funded by UNIDO, which looks at upstream interventions in the manufacturing and retail sector and links this to effective collection of end-of-use plastics, whilst designing a formal role for the informal waste workers. So lots of things that we can do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This sounds good so far.
Sounds really good. Keep going.
Yeah. Finally, I move to Agustin. Triciclos obviously has this great momentum already, branching out already in 3 countries now. How will you keep that momentum going and engage in PACE's initiative?
Yeah, when I saw Krista's presentation, I think that there is a strong fit of what Triciclo has done in the past 12 years. So bringing Triciclo's expertise as a case study to the PACE project to be assessed as a short-term solution for scaling, I think it would be super good stuff to build upon. So yeah, count with us.
That sounds very good. Thank you so much, Agustin. We have a little bit of time left for some audience questions that have come in. One for Professor Benton. We've been talking about the private sector, about government, but what roles should or could NGO and social enterprises and co-ops play in the transition to the circular economy? What's your view on that, Professor Benton?
Absolutely huge. They can play a role directly in helping to organise things, particularly in some of the issues around upskilling capacity and so on. But perhaps importantly, they can play a role in the politicisation and the awareness building of the need to do this. And so lots of different ways that they can contribute.
And is there, for Ms. Jones, thank you, for politicization, is there any collaboration for Ms. Jones with the fishing industry to limit their plastic waste in the oceans? Just a very concrete question for you.
Yes, we head up the Global Ghost Gear Initiative, which works with industry to make sure that they operate with best practices and try to reduce lost fishing gear and also do some fishing gear removal. So there's a lot of work to be done there, and a lot of countries and a lot of industries are actively working to reduce the fishing gear footprint in the ocean because it is one of the most lethal forms of plastic in the ocean.
And a question, thank you, for Alex. When virgin plastic is cheap, how can we incentivize recycling and reduction to engage in a race to the top?
I think there should be some financial mechanism and policies in order to modify and to increase the cost of plastics in order to balance and to allow that the recycled plastic has a good market. Also, we want to include in several policies some obligations in order to incorporate into products a percentage of recycled material, so that also can incentivize the recycling of plastics in our country.
Thank you. Some real practical hands-on questions here at the last minute. I'd like to grab one more for Agustin. Is there a market for recycled plastics besides the plastic bottles?
Sure, there's lots of applications. And building on the answer of our colleague from Colombia, for sure there is a need for drive the demand for recycled plastic and get comprehensive design for recycling guidelines for producers in that mixture between upstream design and understanding what is happening at the end of the first use. In that way, you can drive demand, drive other uses more than plastic PET bottles, right? And to ensure that the quality is in a closed loop fashion.
Absolutely, thank you. Also, for Agustin, can recyclers who are not formalized claim compensation?
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually it's a work in progress, doing the formalization of the informal sector. And there's ways and mechanisms where Triciclos is testing some forms of engaging with them to give them formal competences in order to get certified and based on financial instruments and mechanisms from big companies. So it's a joint effort to do it so.
A very big and general question finally to all of you that is still very practical. What do you consider to be the most important and feasible short-term action to start improving the situation today? Well, who wants to go first? I go to Mr. Sayer.
I think culture and education should be like a key and central to the whole circular economy transition. Should not be like a short term, but it's a very big effective one. So I think that one could be allow us to change and modify some actions in the short term, but will be sustainable in the long term.
Professor Benton?
Well, I think the key is, as several people have said, is getting the incentive structure right to make it more expensive to throw things away and cheaper to recycle them. So that requires governments really pushing the levers that they have at their control to regulate the system to either make it more rewarding or more rewarding to recycle or more expensive to throw things away. So anything that can be done to help governments see the way forward, which is why I think the politicization of the issue is important, i.e. raising awareness, getting citizens to say, we don't want this anymore, we are willing to change. Please, government, will you help industry move in the right direction? Okay. So lots of things in that space.
And you both agree with that, I think. Right, Ms. Jones? Yes.
No silver bullet. I think we need to focus on reduction, managing, and cleaning up at the same time. And everybody's right. It is a systems change to move from a linear to a circular economy. But there's a lot that we can do today to advance that.
Thank you so much. Agustin?
I think it's close to my heart, but I will say innovation through design, like putting people at the center, understanding what are the incentives to drive change from both private sector, producers, waste pickers, citizens, governments, public sector, private sector, everyone. So once showing the value of innovation around these themes and make it excited, I think is a key drive to change.
Thank you. You've brought a lot of that excitement, energy that was really nice. All of you, my gosh, because two of the speakers here were actually flown in, well, not literally flown in, but very last minute. So thank you very much for your spontaneity and your willingness to be part of this panel. Krista, for you, the most important and feasible short-term action, I think, would be to become part of PACE.
Absolutely. And for PACE to pick up all of these suggestions and to pull them together into action, form public and private coalitions, but also involve the impact investors who are willing to take this further. So join us.
Thank you so much, Krista, and all of the speakers. This concludes our session. I'd like to extend a warm thank you to all our speakers and a huge thank you also to our audience for watching and participating so much. Hope to see you again very, very soon. Thank you very much. Bye.